Here we go.
Cool. How you doing, dude?
I'm doing fine. I'm doing fine. Had a little stomach bug last weekend, but that's passed. So
Oh, really? And
yeah,
you're in Sacramento?
I'm in Sacramento.
Nice. I just moved up to Davis,
Okay.
so we're neighbors.
So are you living in student housing or were you living in Davis? Davis is pricey.
Yeah, it is, but I'm from the Bay, so
Oh,
it's not.
it's not as pricey.
No, it's a little bit cheaper than the Bay, so
Yeah.
there's that.
I have a son who's going to school in Santa Cruz. That's pricey.
Oh my God, dude, that's Bay Area prices right there.
Yeah, yeah. It's
What
a
year
little
is he?
crazy. He's a junior.
Okay, so am I.
And yeah, and he just drove there yesterday. I haven't heard about his trip yet. Drove there and drove back, and gonna see. He's rented a place. He's in a place with like 5 guys and doing the whole
Yep.
college thing.
I have a friend who's doing the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, I live in the off-campus housing.
Okay.
Just a place, just an apartment complex, like a mile away from campus.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Yep.
I'm in
So
Davis. I'm pretty familiar with Davis. We have a church plant in Davis. I've had members of my church live in Davis, so
you have a
I'm,
church plant in Davis?
yeah, yeah.
What's it called?
It's called Christ Church Davis.
Christ.
They're right across the street from the public high school.
Cool. And so exactly what denomination are you?
Christian Reformed Church of North America.
Christian Reformed Church of North
Yeah,
America.
yeah.
Nice. So what exactly is the difference between your denomination and other denominations of Christianity? Because it seems like from what I get from watching your videos is that you're not a science denier, I grew up going to a Baptist church, like going to school there.
Yeah.
And they were pretty anti-science.
Yeah.
And, they taught me like things that like the earth is 6,000 years old and, characters in the Bible literally lived hundreds of years and stuff like that. And it seems like you're pretty adapted to the times.
Well, I'm not necessarily skeptical on people in the Bible living hundreds of years old.
Oh, really?
I'm probably more flexible in terms of what reality could be. I'd push on that end of it rather than the other end of it.
Yeah.
And I just finished recording a video on secularity, and I think it's difficult for us to understand how strange the world is. And so I'm not a science skeptic, but I'm not a Bible skeptic either. And so, no, and in that sense, a lot of evangelical or fundamentalist churches, they bear the brunt of the modernist fundamentalist fight that happened at the end of the 19th, beginning of the 20th century. And that fight, so my church roots come out of Europe and some of the stuff that happened in the 19th century in Europe rather than the States. So the history is a little bit different.
Interesting.
Yeah. So
you're talking about the scientific revolution, right? When you say 19th century?
No, quite a bit later than the scientific revolution.
Okay.
I'm talking about Christianity's attempt to come to terms with a lot of the inconvenient truths that science raised to their prior assumed narratives. That sounds a little complicated, but the scientific revolution was a Christian revolution, but the church had a lot of I think in a lot of ways we discover as we find. Jordan Peterson had this great conversation with Roger Scruton where Peterson basically made the point that, we discover truth when we discover error, which is really quite true, because we walk around assuming whole hosts of things that we only assume, and usually on good reason. But then when we bump into something that shows that our assumptions aren't necessarily quite correct or as correct as they should be, then suddenly we have to readjust and come to some new ideas. And that's a painful, difficult process. And the West has been doing that with a lot of things over the last 500 years. The whole world has. So, and Christians, Peterson also made the comment that we have all of these assumptions about how the world is. And when those get challenged, in some ways, psychologically, our worlds come apart. We have to put them back together. And when that happens to communities, it's even more painful and disruptive, because in many ways, the worlds we inhabit are not just pieced together by ourselves as individuals, but by each other as communities. And so to actually have your world disrupted and to have to put it back together is a very painful, difficult thing. And we need each other for all kinds of regular things like companionship, love, caring for one another. And when those bonds are disrupted because lots of other things are getting disrupted, we sort of pull together and say, okay, we're not going to talk about science, not here. We're going to say the whole thing's wrong. But when I go to the store or to the doctor or to the gas station and all of that stuff is built on science, I'm not even going to think about it. And that's what you do. And you have to do it to keep your community together, to be able to keep on living. But at some point, the kids are going to grow up and say, hey, wait a minute. If we're going to believe in a biblical cosmology, do we all also have to believe in Bible medicine? You don't find any fundamentalists around. No, that's not true.
Wanting Bible medicine.
Right. There are some. There are some. There are always some. But they don't live long. And very quickly, Christians on Sunday will go to church declaring that science is bunk, but then when they get sick, they run to the hospital that is filled with scientists.
Yeah.
And so people will watch that after a while and say, what's really going on here? And then there are other people that were raised saying, I believe in science, but they have questions they can't answer.
Yeah,
and so then they sneak into church, and they might sneak into churches that say, we believe in science. And they're like, well, I'm not coming here for science. I don't go to church for science. I want to know what the church has to offer. Or maybe you've been to the doctor and you've been to all kinds of doctors and they couldn't give you healing. And then you go to a church and the pastor prays over you and you start feeling better. And then you start doubting the doctors and believing the pastor. But the pastor has a point and the doctors have a point. How do you make those 2 points fit together? And so in many ways, that's why I got interested in Jordan Peterson. And that's what my whole project's been about.
Yeah, I think this part of the conversation really touches on what I think is the heart of the issue when it comes to, people in my generation. I'm 22 and so it seems like I don't run into anybody who is, I don't want to say fundamentally religious, but, attends church regularly. There are some people who, obviously they believe in evolution and things like that in science, but then they believe in some sort of higher power, God, whether that be, and usually it's in the form of some Judeo-Christian type of God.
Yep.
But I think that, the reconciliation of science and religion, as Nietzsche predicted, I think it's taken a huge toll on, people adopting Christianity. And I went to one of Jordan Peterson's talks. I think it was in San Francisco, and we did a Q&A at the end of it. And I asked him basically if he thinks that the church is at all to blame for not being able to adapt with the times, because from my perspective, I think that that's the key thing that turns people off, especially in my generation, to the Bible, religion, is the fact that it states so many things that would be scientifically or factually absurd, right? And they think that because that doesn't seem likely to be true or even possible, that the whole scripture should be tossed out in some sense, even though there are obviously extremely important ideas and themes and, the assignment of value to human life, and it seems like reconciling, a text where it has all these scientific claims of, things that seem implausible, and then also all these metaphorical truths or value truths, or truths that aren't apparent to the eye, but work in a broader context when applied onto a society. And it seems like that is the heart of the issue when it comes to my generation adopting more of a Judeo-Christian value, or at least seeing the importance of the scriptures.
I think, a lot of what I've been talking about over the last couple of years is, what ruler would you use? What value ruler would you use to measure the Bible with if you weren't living in a culture that's been soaking in it for over 1,000 years?
Yeah.
And in many cases, some of the most adamant critics of the Bible, the Bible came under criticism in terms of things that we might categorize as fact or science. A lot of that happened 100 to 150 years ago.
No.
It's only within the last 20 years that the Bible came under criticism for things that we might categorize as value. Before that, the values of the Bible.
In what sense?
Well,
in what sense do you mean, like, in what sense is the Bible being criticized for its values?
If someone like Sam Harris reads it and says, "Oh, the Bible condones slavery,"
yeah,
something like that. During the American Civil War, there was a vehement struggle between theologians north and south as to what the Bible says about slavery. Some would say it permitted slavery. Some said it demanded slavery for those who were. That was actually after the Civil War.
Or like you can't eat oysters, or is it oysters? Some seafood.
It's seafood. Any crustacean.
Oh, okay, any crustacean. What about I also hear all the time the multiple pieces of cloth.
Yeah.
From wearing multiple pieces.
But the Bible also says you shouldn't have sex with your sister.
Yeah.
And is the Bible right about that?
Yeah.
Why? Why would it be right about not having sex with your sister, but wrong about not eating shrimp?
Why would it be wrong about not having sex with your sister? So obviously I also think there's a biological argument for why it's not good to have sex with your sister. I don't think there's a biological argument why it's bad to eat shrimp. Nor is it obvious in any way why it might be bad to eat shrimp.
How is it obvious not to have sex with your sister?
Because
the whole category of obviousness.
Inbreeding just isn't good in general.
Where would you learn that? Right? How many people have you seen have produced children with their siblings? Do you know any?
No.
It's been told to you, so you do it. Maybe this is a story made up by people.
It's been researched, right?
Has it been? Well, how dangerous can it be? Abraham did it. I'm sorry. I'm just having fun with you.
It's all good. Obviously there's cognitive impairments that come along with inbreeding. There can be physical malformalities.
So if a brother and sister decided they were going to be really careful, and like she was on the pill and he used a condom, then would it be moral to have sex with each other?
I don't think so, but yeah, I see what you're saying. I see what point you're trying to make. Like, that value isn't inherent, right? Like it's not obvious. It's not a sign. It's not a fact that we could pick apart, right? It's a value that we have instilled in us, you know, probably, I'm sure from the Bible, right? From Judeo-Christian values or whatever.
It's beyond the Bible too. It's not an uncommon taboo anthropologically, but the whole question of values, you know, is a very difficult one because the world is so big and so complex. Why do we prioritize some things over other things? Okay. And our best guess now why we do so is because we inhabit this, what I'm calling a symbolic, dramatic, imaginary that we certainly can't live without. Sometimes we call it culture. And, you know, this is one of Brett Weinstein's big points, that human beings are not simply the product of genetics, they're the product of culture. And, sure. And Peterson made the same point, that over time, cultural learnings began to shape genetic pathways as well. And so at some point we have to ask value questions because we can't seem to live without them. We can't get values. This is a debated point, obviously. Science doesn't tell us values. Science might tell us what might happen at the end of a causal link, or science might tell us how to pursue certain outcomes, but it can't tell us which valued outcomes are better than others.
For sure.
You know, maybe you and your sister, I don't know if you have a sister or not, so I mean, this gets creepy quickly, but maybe you and your sister would have a baby and that baby would grow up to cure cancer. So how could someone say that brother-sister love is wrong? I mean, the arguments could go like this all day, but I don't know. I don't know if this is what you wanted to talk about today.
Dude, I just want to have a conversation.
Oh, okay,
really.
Well, let me hear some of your story then. So you grew up Baptist, and what are you studying?
I didn't really grow up Baptist, actually. I grew up very atheist.
Oh, really?
Radically atheist, yeah.
So when did that happen? Were your parents radically atheist? Did they reject the church?
No.
Do they still go to church?
I mean, no. My family was not religious. You know, I got into philosophy and science and things like that pretty young.
Okay.
My father, you know, he talked to me about we had a very open relationship in the sense that we talked about difficult things all the time.
Okay.
Which was good. You know, he challenged me
all
the time on ideas and things like that. Him and I disagree on a lot, a lot now, but at the time he's sort of the one who kind of got the wheels turning in my brain in terms of, you know, thinking about religion and things like that. I think he without a doubt influenced me because he was pretty secularist. Mm-hmm. And so I actually switched over to a Baptist school when I was in middle school, so 6th grade. And by the time I got there, everything that was being taught to me, I vehemently rejected.
Why did you go to a Baptist school? Didn't your parents want you to go
just
to
because
they
didn't want me to go to public school in the area.
Okay.
So that was the school that was nearest to my house that they just wanted me to go to a private school. They didn't want me to go to any of the schools in the area.
Okay. So if you had to learn the Bible as a price of going to a private school, so be it.
Yeah. And so when I went there and I was being taught all these, I would say like anti-science, all this anti-science, it just turned me into almost like I went home and would study why what they were teaching me was wrong. You know, and I would go up to Bible class the next day and raise my hand and write and answer and ask questions and try and pick apart all the arguments made by my Bible teacher.
How'd that go?
And it went pretty well.
Good.
At least I didn't really get in trouble or anything for this because my Bible teacher actually encouraged asking hard questions and things like that, even though I may have had some nefarious motives.
Sure.
Being an angsty 12-year-old or 13-year-old, whatever.
Yeah.
And So so that continued throughout all of my middle school. I was really attracted to Nietzsche in his attack on religiousness at the time. And as I grow older, obviously I realized that he attacked, super fundamentalist religion, but he also recognized its value and its importance. And being a 12-year-old, I just like read up on what I wanted to hear.
Sure. Sure.
And so yeah, and then when I was I went through my whole life pretty much being like a radical atheist.
Okay.
And then when I was, probably 4 years ago, I found Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
And I heard about him when the transgender, pronoun thing popped off.
Yeah.
And I watched that video. I thought it was compelling.
Yeah.
His eloquence. And then I'm also a psychology student, and I've always been interested in psychology. I always wanted to be some sort of therapist or doctor or something like that.
Yeah.
And so when I heard that he was a psychology professor, and I went back and watched a lot of his lectures and things like that, I've seen thousands of hours of Jordan Peterson.
Yeah.
Every piece of anything uploaded on YouTube I've seen.
Yeah.
And he completely revolutionized for me how I view the Bible and Christianity. And he showed me that it's so much deeper than the surface criticisms I had of it, pointing out things in the Bible, the scientific aspects of the Bible, the scientific claims, and then just tearing them apart.
Yeah.
And he really showed me that it's so much deeper, and that kind of how disoriented we are without values, or kind of how disoriented we would be without some of these biblical values that are instilled in us that we just accept as true.
Yeah. Yeah.
The value of human life, for example, like that's not an obvious thing.
Yeah.
Right. That's an amazing idea.
Yeah.
Like at the cornerstone of our society in which we're built upon, that's America, or that's so many Western countries, and other countries adopting that view all over the world every day.
Yeah.
And so when I realized how much deeper of an issue this is, it really transformed my my view on religion, and especially Christianity. I wouldn't say I'm a churchgoer or anything like that, or that I pray to God every day or anything like that, but it's really done well for me in recognizing that there are, especially the idea of metaphorical truths. I don't think there's a better example of a metaphorical truth than the idea of value in a human, and not only that, but other ideas in the Bible. And so, he really transformed how I view Christianity and the Bible. I'm definitely not a hardened atheist. I would not consider myself that anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
So what do you think God is, or is there a God?
That's the $1 million question.
Yeah, well, I mean,
what do I
take
think
a shot at it for
I think
free.
I mean, it sounds like hoopty-doopty or whatever, but when I think of God, I think of everything we don't know I think of everything outside of, not only outside of, but also intertwined with human knowledge and the force behind nature. I think God, whatever God is the reason why physics works, why chemistry works, why biochemistry works, why biology works. I think it's everything. I think everything that's unknown, the forces behind. I don't think it's like a man in the sky or anything like that. But I think it's, in a sense, incomprehensible. I mean, the Bible literally says that, right? That you can't even
say
that you
that way, but
it says something
message,
something akin to.
It said a bunch of things that has made the church say that.
Interesting. Yeah, it said stuff like you can't even begin to comprehend what God is, in a sense, right? In that you can't place any limits on God, or you can't even begin to speak about, because it's so incomprehensible, the power or the forces, whatever, right? And yeah.
So how do you think, what what did Jordan Peterson say or do that brought you to this conclusion?
Well, I think one of the most compelling things is there's this lecture he has. It's so interesting, the parallels of psychology and that he draws between psychology and theology. I really like the lecture where he talks about, well, there's multiple, but he talks about how everything we do is operating on a value-based system, in that the reason I'm looking at you and not my wall over there and my pictures behind me is because of a value hierarchy that I have in my brain that tells me that you're the most important thing in the room right now that I'm looking at, making contact with, and that how my brain filters everything out around me. And that's not only true, but it's a survival mechanism, and how we orient ourselves in terms of this unconscious value system that we have, and that it's always operating no matter what. And that without not only aim, but without this value hierarchy that we have, whether conscious or unconscious, that we can't operate in the world. And what constitutes the correct value, even if we're thinking philosophically or maybe legally and something like that. Sorry, I kind of forget where I was going. It's
no, you're doing fine. You're doing fine.
Kind of a deep point, but when you apply this idea to things like value of the human life and how a society has its morals, and it's just amazing at how complex our unconscious is, and how guided our unconscious is. Even by things just in the Bible. In things that we learn and absorb through society and just growing up where we grow up, right?
How did watching a lot of Peterson's videos change how you feel about your life or what you did with your time?
I think well, he's changed my life, or his ideas, right, have changed my life in an innumerable amount of ways. I was very nihilistic.
Okay.
I don't want to say purposeless, but I felt that life was. And that's a hard question. But I felt I was a very nihilistic person, and then just realizing how I don't know everything, and that I can't know everything, and that I should be more accepting of things that I don't know, and challenge my beliefs, and not assume that I know everything, is probably one of the biggest things that I've learned. Also, challenging myself all the time in whatever it is that I'm thinking. Obviously, that's probably the hardest thing to do. One of the hardest things to do is whatever it is you think that you know, and then interacting with the counter argument to whatever that is, and then not only just interacting with it, but making it more powerful. Try and make that argument that's against what you believe as powerful as you possibly can, and make a strong man argument of the opposite side. And I mean, that's such a thing that I think I don't want to say it seems lost in our culture and our society today, especially with the political climate going on today. You know how crazy it is.
Well, you're living in the middle of some craziness, Davis can be.
Dude. I mean, I grew up in the Bay before, so.
Oh, that's true. So this isn't new to you.
Davis is the minor leagues.
In Sacramento, we sometimes joke, call it the People's Republic of Davis.
There you go.
But no, Davis is a great place. I love Davis.
It's a nice town.
There. So, so you're studying psychology, and you're a junior. Okay. Yeah. Are all your classes online, or you get to take some in person?
I believe they're all going to be online this quarter. Hopefully next quarter.
Okay.
We'll see what happens. The whole COVID thing has got everyone in a loop.
Yeah. So you started a little podcast or something?
Yeah.
That's okay. Okay. Is it an audio, or is it on YouTube too? Or
so I mean, you're the first person I've talked to, actually.
Oh, great.
I wanted you to be the first guest.
Oh, that's awesome.
Well, because you're local.
Yeah.
I really like what you do in the breaking down of Jordan videos, and I feel like Jordan, in some sense, I owe him some sort of homage to who I am today, and how I view life and how I act in my life.
Yeah.
And I think that you're a good person for that, because you really take the time to talk with average people. You don't seem to collab with a bunch of big YouTubers, even though you could.
I don't know if I could.
I think you could, dude. You got thousands of subscribers on YouTube.
Yeah. But part of the problem with hierarchies is that they bind and blind, and you find this with church. You find this with almost any hierarchy. Once people develop a little clique, little cliques can become rather dull because it's all about the clique. So
yeah, I saw your conversation with him.
Oh, with Jordan?
Yeah.
It
was a little short. You had to go.
Well, the whole thing happened for some really insane reasons, but there
what was that? Friend of a friend?
A guy who started listening to my videos had basically had a slot, and so wanted to hear me talk to Peterson, so he arranged it, and so that happened. And I'm hoping Jordan can get well and get, in a sense, back in the game. It'll be very interesting if he does, because the world has changed a lot, even in the last
2
year
years
or so,
dude.
Since he's been
out
of action. So
big time. I would love to see him come out of the shadows.
Yeah. Or even I think what he really needs to do is just get healthy and rest, and then probably just do some thinking again, and do some writing and reading. And it'll be interesting, because obviously he's tremendously popular, and he'll have lots of people listening to him, but what will emerge from this journey to the underworld that he's been on for the last year?
Yeah, who knows?
That's hard to know.
I mean, I think we need him.
Yeah, I do want to see him back in the conversations. So we'll see what comes. You never know.
Get into some American media, maybe go on Joe Rogan.
Yeah. Has Joe Rogan, has he made the jump now to Spotify? I haven't checked that out yet.
Yeah. So right now it's Spotify and YouTube. It's not exclusively Spotify yet.
Okay.
I think at the beginning of 2021, it's going to be exclusively Spotify. And I heard that they're doing the clips. Do you watch any of his clips on YouTube?
Sometimes, yeah.
It's the JRE clips and things like that. Really useful if you don't want to watch the whole 3 hours.
Yeah.
Spotify, I heard, is going to be doing clips, or maybe they're still allowing him to post the clips on YouTube.
Okay.
But they're going to have some video form on Spotify.
Okay.
It should be cool. I was listening to him right before we started this. Him and Lex Fridman.
Yeah, I saw a little
AI
bit of
podcast.
Lex. Yeah.
Oh, you saw some of that?
Yeah, I didn't see some of it with him and Joe Rogan, but I saw a little bit of Lex Fridman's introduction to one of his recent podcasts, where he said it was just on Joe Rogan. So, there's just a lot of YouTube puts out a lot of content. I can't always keep up with it.
There's so much. There's so never ending.
No.
He would be a cool person to talk to. I'm sure you should reach out to him.
Joe Rogan?
No,
Lex Fridman?
Lex.
Yeah. I don't often pursue those kinds of things, because they don't know who I am. And like in some cases, I know who other people are. I knew Tom Holland obviously better than he knew my work. But I wanted to talk to Tom. So there's some people right now I do want to talk to, and I might pursue some of them, but most of them are, I'd like to have a conversation with Andrew Root at some point. He's written some interesting books, and then there's a few others out there, but the way to grow your channel and get a big podcast is talk
Collab.
to big name people. And
yeah, dude.
kinda work
Collab.
your way. Yeah. I don't know. I got it.
And I mean, you've got enough of an audience on YouTube to where you can get some pretty cool names.
Yeah. I don't know if I like that game. I like
Really?
I like the game I'm playing now. So
what is that exactly? Just talking to whoever?
Well, if I would talk to, I don't know Joe Rogan obviously at all, but if I were to talk to Joe Rogan, I want to interview Joe Rogan. But in some ways, talking to someone like you tells me more, because how many Joe Rogans are there?
Yeah.
He's a sample of one.
Yeah.
You're a psychology student at UC Davis who grew up in the Bay Area, and now you're unique, and there's no one else in all of human history that's quite like you. But I think in some ways I learned more about the world talking to you than I would to Joe Rogan. So that's part of the reason I like talking to randos, as they say, because I learn more. And maybe it's a selfish reason, but I share videos like I intend to share this conversation probably tomorrow, unless one of us says something that we can't put on YouTube. But I think part of the reason that we listen to other randos, even though obviously if I interviewed Joe Rogan, that would be one of my most popular videos. I know that, having made YouTube videos. But when I talk to you, Joe Rogan has to, and he doesn't do it that much. I mean, he basically says what he thinks. But to me, it's a little bit more interesting talking to you, because, I mean, you've already told me things that surprise me. So you grew up in the Bay Area. Your father was fairly secular, but didn't want to go to the public school for whatever reason, sent to a Baptist school. And you went to that Baptist school and you learned stuff in Bible class that made you wanted to go and try to, debunk the Bible teacher. And the Bible teacher liked it and engaged in conversation. I mean, all that to me is really interesting, because it says a lot about, well, I don't know what school you went to, but the school that you went to, and about the Bible teacher, and about, it says a lot to me. Whereas talking to Joe Rogan would tell me something about Joe Rogan, but probably less about the world, because Joe Rogan is so singular and unique. But it's the same reason that when, of course, we're getting close to a presidential election, there's all kinds of polling. They don't just poll high status people if they want to get a sense of what's happening in the country. They poll randos. And so in a sense, what I do with my conversation is I'm polling randos, because you can pretty much, within a fairly broad spectrum, tell me what's ever on your mind.
Yeah.
Joe Rogan's got a reputation to consider. He's got, all of that status comes with a price. You don't have that price. You can just tell me what you think. And I think that's in some ways more valuable information. So that's part of the reason I don't chase names for my channel. I find it less interesting.
Yeah, I mean, if you're happy with where you're at and you don't have this desperate need to want to get hundreds of thousands of subscribers or millions, right?
Yeah.
I mean, to each his own.
Yeah. My life gets busy enough with just the little audience I have often. So
yeah, I mean, I can't imagine looking at comments all the time. Every video you post, getting dozens and dozens of comments and things like that all the time.
Patterns develop, and so you look at just like you say, you develop this filter. So you look at who wrote the comment.
Yeah.
There's a lot of repetition in terms of who comments, and then their comment will be along certain lines. And so you read such and such a person and their comment, and you begin to anticipate. But then sometimes you find other comments. I especially like the negative comments. I always find them usually the most educational and sometimes the most amusing. Especially the insulting comments.
Yeah, as far as negative comments, I would imagine yours aren't too bad.
No, they're really not.
I think you've sort of bred like a nice little ecosystem.
Yeah. And
Within
that also
YouTube.
comes with a bigger channel.
Oh,
The
for
bigger
sure.
channel,
Oh,
more and
yeah.
more random people stumble across your video. They don't have any context about what they're saying. Many of the people that listen to my videos have listened to a lot of my content. And so it's richly contextual, which in my opinion makes the interchanges far more profitable for me. So, and in
Did you
that
need to
way,
end it? Did you need to end at one? Because I mean, there's a lot of things I would like to talk about.
no, we
Or
don't need to end at 1. We should
okay,
probably end at about 1:30. So I'm being
okay,
selfish again. You go ahead. Ask your questions.
it's all good.
I'll try and behave.
So, so I just wanted to get your opinion on this Bible verse, and it's
Okay.
a really popular Bible verse,
Okay.
but it's one that particularly strikes at my core,
Okay.
and I think, in my opinion, it's one of the most insightful,
Okay.
psychologically acute
Okay.
statements in the Bible.
Okay.
And it is that the kingdom of heaven is spread across the earth, but man cannot see it.
That's
Are you aware of that one?
that. See, part of the fun about the Bible is that some of these translations can get really creative. The kingdom of
Of
God,
heaven
of heaven. Okay, so Matthew
is spread across the earth. It's just that man cannot see it, or but man cannot see it. I think about that quote every day.
That's from the Gospel of Thomas. No wonder I don't recognize it. It's not from the Bible.
What? The Gospel of Thomas.
Oh, let's see. That's quoted in the Gospel of Thomas. Let's see. The disciples said to him, "When will the kingdom come?" Jesus said, "It will not come by waiting for it. It will not be a matter of saying, here it is or there it is. Rather, the kingdom of the Father is spread out upon the earth, and men do not see it." As quoted in the
Oh, I
Gospel
love
of
it.
Thomas, saying 1:13. You know, I'd heard the quote before,
Uh-huh.
and but I I didn't recognize it as a biblical quote. But sometimes what happens with biblical translations are that translators can get a little creative, and so I wondered. And Google is one of the best Bible search engines there are. You just
Google
start
is the
typing in that
best
quote.
search engine for anything.
Yeah, it's true, even the Bible. So the fact that it would come out of the Gospel of Thomas doesn't surprise me, because the Gospel of Thomas is a Gnostic gospel. And
What does that mean?
okay, so Gnosticism was a philosophical, cultural, theological tendency that tended to emphasize immateriality over physicality, but also believed that secret knowledge is essential for understanding what's really happening in the world. And if you understand that about Gnosticism, the quote makes perfect sense. And the fact that it isn't a quotation from the Bible makes it all the more interesting. So, yeah, it's a quote from the Gospel of Thomas. Very interesting. But so, and you know, the dynamic of those who have eyes to see, those who have ears to hear. Jesus says that quite a bit. And the idea is that it's not too far from Jordan Peterson's assertion that we are not transparent to ourselves.
Yeah.
We, to one degree or another Jordan Peterson thing, we walk around with these mental cartoons, and that's what we interact with. And it's not until there's dissonance between the cartoon in our head and enough information that's coming to us that we have to readjust our mental cartoon. So, but it's a very interesting saying.
I think the psychological poignancy of that is just astonishing to me.
Yeah.
Because we're biologically wired to always think of and confront maybe not always confront, but at least to pay attention to the things that aren't going right in our lives.
Yeah. Yeah.
And at least think about them and contend with them, and think about, how shitty our situation is, and all these things that we can't have, and what's not going right in our life. And that quote just, or that quote just sort of shows the human condition so well, that we choose not to see the kingdom of heaven or the light or what's going right in our life.
Yeah, well, that's very true. That's
and
very true.
I think about that all the time.
Yeah,
I think that's just an amazing quote.
Oh, cool. That's fun. That's really very interesting.
What about you? What are some of your favorite little verses or quotes?
Oh boy,
give me two.
Yeah. Second, two from 2 Corinthians.
What was that?
No, I'm just joking. Oh, for me, I sound like Donald Trump here. For me, Bible quotes so often come out of moments. I mean, the 23rd Psalm, it's so trite, but there are times when, one of the beautiful things of having been raised Christian is that there are biblical quotes and sometimes songs that are so deeply burned into you that when you need them, they're there. I mean, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not be in want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me by still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in the Psalm 23.
Okay.
Guides me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death.
Yeah.
I will fear no evil, for your rod, so you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my enemies. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy. And I always think of that as 3 girls. Surely goodness and mercy. Surely goodness and mercy will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. That's a favorite. That's a favorite verse. Another one, it's in the Gospel of Luke where Jesus says, be of good cheer, or basically be encouraged, little flock, for it's the Father's pleasure to give you the kingdom. And it's just that little verse just has the power of God's benevolence towards us. And also a verse that Jordan Peterson and I see differently on, which is blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. Because I see a lot of people who have been beaten down by this world, and the thought that God will in fact restore them and look out for them is a powerful, encouraging thought. So
yeah, I saw his deconstruction of that verse.
Yeah, I think he's totally wrong.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, he's totally wrong.
Well, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
He has this idea about a sword and stuff, and it's like a sheathed sword. It's like, no.
Yeah.
It's in terms of, if you understand.
Wait, could you just clarify exactly what his sort of interpretation of that passage was?
His idea is that you ought to be powerful but restrained, and I think that's an absolutely right idea, but it has nothing to do with the verse or its context. So, and there's a lot of that with reading the Bible. Well, the Beatitudes. So there are Beatitudes in the Psalms, and what a Beatitude is basically a blessed is or blessed are phrase. And so if you look at the first Psalm, basically many Psalms say things like, blessed are the people who follow God's law, because God will look out for them and bless them and protect them and preserve them. And that's the kind of Beatitude saying we would expect to see. Jesus' Beatitudes at the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount are so odd. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And it's like, well, okay. You can kind of get there from the Psalm Beatitudes, but then he says something like, blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. He takes basically, Simon and Garfunkel got that Beatitude more right than Jordan Peterson. Simon and Garfunkel in their song, you know, blessed are the spat upon, the trodden upon. And basically what Jesus says in that beatitude is that blessed are these, he's riffing off the Old Testament, blessed are these little ones who have been crushed by the earth, but look to God for deliverance. And then what is offered them is absolutely everything. They will inherit the earth.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a shockingly beautiful couplet, and so absolutely audacious to say in the context of the world he was living in, where, you know, if you get sick, if you are crippled, if you are poor, you're just screwed at so many different levels. And Jesus says, no, God will give them the world. And it's like, no, the Romans have the world. The powerful have the world. The beautiful have the world. The wealthy have the world. And Jesus says, no, God's going to give the world to those small crushed ones that look to God for their hope. It's just an audacious phrase, given when he said it. And Peterson's interpretation just doesn't have that power that Jesus, and Peterson, I can completely understand why Peterson stumbled on that verse, because it's saying,
a prominent verse.
What's that?
That's a prominent
It's a very
verse.
prominent verse,
yeah.
But it's also so just completely audacious and so dramatically, it's completely unscientific. It's one of the most unscientific things Jesus ever said. And Jesus just says it. And that's a pretty bold statement for a guy who's about to basically lose a culture war and get spread naked on a Roman cross. So,
so let's break it down a little bit.
Okay.
So it sounds powerful, right? Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth.
Yeah.
What exactly do you make of that?
I think it's true.
How so?
So how many nameless Chinamen are buried in the Great Wall of China?
Many.
Do we, let's say, they would allow archaeologists go down and discover their bodies and do, run tests to find out what their diet was. And, then they sketch out a composite of what a virtual slave or serf in medieval China is, what their life was like. Their life was nothing. Their life was crap. Their life was garbage.
Yeah. So how will they inherit the earth?
Well, that's a good question. It ain't going to be by any power that we currently possess, will it?
Interesting. So it means sort of maybe some afterlife gift or something like that.
Along those lines, but not exclusively that either. And part of why I resist that is that there's a category assumption there that's built deep into modernity that, well, maybe it's true, maybe it isn't, but I'm not ready to just swallow it as such. So, and so then when you pastor a church and a child gets cancer and you recognize that this child's life is going to be cruel, brutal, and short, and you look at parents that are just being devastated by this life that they brought into the world and so many hopes for, and now are facing the fact that even if the child survives, that child will never marry, the child may never get a job, the child might be disabled for their entire life. This world has very little hope to give such a situation. And Jesus walks in and says, blessed are the meek. That child is meek, for they will inherit the earth. And suddenly those parents have a hope that they can feed off of and survive off of, as maybe for the rest of those parents' natural lives, they will be changing diapers and feeding and sacrificing money and time just to keep this one tortured soul alive. That's a powerful thing. Yeah. And Jesus my understanding of what Jesus was saying, these parents can feed off of and give meaning to the suffering of their child. And cutting that verse short by saying, oh no, there's some fringe lexical understanding of Meek that interprets it as being powerful, but sublimating that power in a moment to, which again is also a powerful image, but it won't help those parents of that disabled, suffering child. So that's why I prefer what I think is what Jesus was really saying, because it offers that family the kind of powerful hope that in most cases throughout most of human history, our science or technology never could.
Yeah. Any other verses that stand out?
Oh, there's so many. I love so in the book of 2 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, when the Apostle Paul's just an interesting critter. I mean, the guy must have been bipolar, because sometimes he's high as a kite and powerful, and other times he's on the floor suffering from depression. And so he's he's suffering from depression, and he'll go into these cities and he'll preach the resurrection of Jesus, and it just completely divide a synagogue of nice, lovely people. And then some will want to follow him and some will want him dead. And then people will abandon him, and he gets to be, and then in 2 Corinthians 12, he talks about this thorn in the flesh and people have speculated, was it bad eyesight? Was it same-sex attraction? Was it? People tend to project whatever issues are present day onto Paul's thorn in the flesh. But Paul, in many of his writings, witnessed to dramatic revelations and astounding miracles and all of this stuff that Paul experienced in his life. And here's this one thing in his life that he prays to God, and God said, God, just this one thing, and maybe it's eyesight. Let's say it's eyesight for the sake of this story. Lord, just, if I could see better, I could do your ministry better. And God says to him, God won't remove the thorn. And he says, my power is made perfect in weakness. And that's another one of these phrases that it sounds so counterintuitive. What do you mean your power is made perfect in weakness? That makes no sense. Come on, get off it. That's something that Yoda would say, but it's something like your Gospel of Thomas quote. And basically God says to Paul, I'll heal other people willy-nilly through you. And you might look at those miracles as throwaways, but I'm going to keep you limited, because actually in my plan, that's how you'll serve me most. And that's when you're, so there's a church up in Reading, a couple hours north. It's Bethel. And the church is just big into healing, into spiritual healing. And they're not anti-science or anything. They tell people to go to the doctor, et cetera, but they're big into healing. And sometimes you see people that, gosh, they need a miracle. And you would have to imagine that any loving God would give it to them. And the whole church is praying, and everybody is really wanting to see it happen, and it never happens.
No.
And that makes a lot of people say, oh gosh, there isn't a God. We're just this whole church thing, it's all BS, and we're barking up the wrong tree. And that story of Paul just always gives a little glimmer of light that God keeps his own counsel, and sometimes does things that we think are totally insane, but maybe, just maybe, he has a plan and a reason. And maybe, just maybe, I can keep trusting him even when everything seems nuts. So that's a powerful story in the Bible.
Yeah. So I've seen you also talk to a lot of people about philosophy.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it seems like you talk about Nietzsche quite a bit.
I was just reading, if you want to learn some philosophy,
yeah,
there's a book by, you know who Will Durant is?
I've heard the name.
Okay. So he wrote just volumes of Western history, the story of civilization. And he's got a 1-volume book, The Story of Philosophy. And just this morning, I'm up to Nietzsche's story, and you get this image of this little nerdy man who,
can't get women.
Yep. Even when the army is taking everything, and he tries to, he's the son of generations of preachers, and he tries to get out of the army. No, we're not going to let you out. They're not going to let you out of. Then they get him in the army, and they discover he's absolutely worthless. And so he gets kicked out of the army, and, can't get women, is unhealthy, isn't mentally very durable, all this stuff. But he writes about the Superman. And at some point you might say, are you compensating for something here? Because, it's sort of like the little Corporal Adolf becoming this tyrant. And so often it's the small, weak men that have to prove something. And you almost get that sense with Nietzsche at some point. Not that he wasn't brilliant and tremendously important, but I didn't know much biography of him, and listening to it, it's kind of like, oh, this is fascinating. But anyway, go on. So,
he made one of the craziest predictions.
Yeah. No, he's astoundingly brilliant. Very, very right. But I wouldn't want to be him.
I don't know. The way he wrote and the way his mind worked was absolutely insane, in a good way, in my estimation.
Well, he's a brilliant guy. No, absolutely. But his vision of the world, true, a lot of truth to it. But his, we can so often learn people who have ideas that we don't necessarily embrace or promote. It's one of Jordan Peterson's rules. Listen to them as if you have something to learn. Gosh, you can learn a ton from Nietzsche. You can learn a ton from Schopenhauer. You can learn a ton from brutal tyrants, because guess what? You're not going to become a successful tyrant unless you know something about people. Yeah. So, there's a saying in Spanish, the devil isn't so smart because he's the devil. It's because he's old, because he's seen a lot. So yeah, you can learn a lot. Anyway, what about Nietzsche?
I wanted, in terms of predictions, talking about amazing predictions.
Yeah.
He lived, I think he was born in the 1840s, maybe a little bit earlier, something like that. And so it seems like a lot of his works were published in the latter half of the 19th century.
By his sister, right?
So I don't think, no, he was a published author himself when he was alive.
Yeah.
And his sister put together, I believe, what's the book name? I think I have it right here. It's not. What's the name of the book? Is it Beyond Good and Evil? Pretty sure was the book it was his last book, I'm pretty sure. And it was put together by his sister. He was writing it when he was intensely sick, couldn't get out of bed. And it was a bunch of like scrummaged notes. And that's the one where he talks about how the Superman, the Ubermensch, sort of how an Ubermensch lives and how to become one, create your own values, which I think is a lot easier to say than actually do.
Yeah.
But
I agree with Peterson that individual human beings can't do it. We are way too dependent on
our biology,
this cultures, this symbolic, dramatic imaginary that we inhabit, and so our values are going to come from that. So I think Peterson's dead on right with that.
Yeah. But let's talk about his prediction.
Okay.
Do you know which prediction?
Well, I don't know which one you're talking about. I know that Peterson, claimed that, that Nietzsche predicted a lot of, what we're, the communism and also Dostoevsky's prediction. So what are you talking about?
So what I'm talking about is the amazing quote we've all heard that seems nihilistic, but is really not when you read into it more. And that is the death of God.
Oh, okay.
And so he said, God is dead, for we have killed him.
Right.
And there will not be enough water to wash away the blood.
Right.
And I mean, when you read that, that's one of the boldest statements someone can make. And then not only to have a statement be that bold, but then when you read it and realize that it's in conjunction with the time of people, revolutionary, evolutionary figures, like, oh my God, I'm drawing a blank right now. The biggest Darwin, exactly. When you read it and realize that it's in conjunction with the times of Darwin and better scientific tools, microscopes, and things like that, and realize that Nietzsche was following the scientific like the very beginnings of the scientific revolution, and then drawing the conclusion that the scientific worldview and the religious worldview are going to clash, and that it's going to create such devastation that there's not going to be enough water to wash away the blood. It's absolutely insane. And then when you look at 50 years later, not even that long, 30, 40, 50 years later, what happens with World War I, World War II, the whole world is at war. And then you realize, then you look deeper into that and realize that, okay, let's see why the world is at war. Let's see what's going on with the countries who maybe, I don't want to say started the war, but what are sort of the different values of the countries that are fighting in this war that have killed, I think it's like 200, 300 million people between World War I and II. Let's look at the values. And then you realize that Nazi Germany and Soviet Russia, and that Soviet Russia was declared the first secular state, and that I'm pretty sure Soviet Russia was the very first to declare themselves secularist.
Well,
and then was it that? And then Germany became a secular state.
Well, the American Constitution is secular. The states had established churches, but the American Constitution is secular. And so again, these defining these ideas. But Soviet Union was an atheist state.
Yes.
Now atheists today get nervous with that label, but the United States was founded mostly by deists in terms of the founding fathers, and there's some really good books written about that. But no, the Soviet Union, an atheist state, which is an astounding thing given how deeply Christian Russia was.
Mm-hmm.
The history of the 20th century is just beyond amazing in many ways. There's a great book on the First World War called The Great and Holy War, how World War I became a religious crusade. And it's really helpful because, while in some ways the First World War was both the high point and the beginning of the decline of modernity.
What do you mean by modernity? I hear you say that a lot.
Well, this belief, this rather naive perspective that we see and operate directly in the world. This, Jordan Peterson talks about it at the beginning of, a world of, let's say, a world of things, a world of objects.
Okay, so like synonymous with materialism.
Yeah,
sort of.
Yeah, okay. Something along that line. So modernity, there's a lot to it. Modernity is a certain approach to the world, and I think it's deeply a product of Christianity and the Enlightenment, and I think that the Enlightenment is a deeply Christian project as well. But the idea that it's sort of a self-forgetfulness that I can simply know the truth and see it and act on it. Whereas the truth is, and a lot of the Peterson stuff gets at, well, the truth isn't quite that obvious to us. Which truths? And so then Peterson, of course, is his Darwinian truth. So I don't know if any of that helps, but the First World War was a very important and interesting conflict. And many argue, I think quite rightly, that actually it's the First World War begins in 1914 and ends in 1945. And one might even extend that all the way to the 1980s with the Cold War, because the issues in play in all of these wars philosophically are all deeply connected. And you can point all back to Nietzsche.
Yeah, because could you kind of harp on what you mean by they're all interconnected? Like they seem to be deeply religious in a sense.
They have to do with the death of God, in the sense that for Yuval Harari brings this out in his book Homo Deus. I think it's in Homo Deus, where one way to understand the 20th century is the struggle between three dominant paradigms. Obviously the atheist, materialist, kind of a evolutionary materialist framework in communism. That this is the narrative of progress. And so when Khrushchev says to Kennedy, we will bury you. So that was the communist strain. And then there's the Nazi strain, which is also a Darwinian progressivist, but a kind of a neo-paganism that a number of my videos ago, it used to bother me. Okay, so Hitler was anti-Semitic. Why was he anti-Semitic? What's this? I always wondered, what's this strange business with anti-Semitism? Why is everybody pissed off at the Jews all the time? What's with that?
I'm Jewish.
Yeah,
by blood.
A few years ago, I discovered how much I was too. Didn't even know it, because apparently my ancestors decided to be better Dutch than Jewish. So
23andMe?
No, it was before that. A cousin of my father's had a good friend who was a genealogist, and about 7-8 years ago came to our family, said, "Do you know you guys are Jews?" We're like, "What?" Anyway, so where was I going with this? Oh yeah. So what did the Nazis have against the Jews? Well, at least part of what they had against the Jews was a kind of a hyper environmentalism that said, you can't attribute this directly to Nietzsche, but they certainly borrowed some ideas from him, that all this slave morality that Jesus and the Jews really got going, what humanity really needs to do is be completely natural. And in nature, groups compete and individuals compete, and the dominant ones will emerge from the struggle. And so what you need to do, Timothy Snyder writes well about this, what you need to do is get rid of states. And so to let the natural struggle continue, and that will improve the race. And the Jews are the chief problem of this, which is ironic because they're the ones winning all the Nobel Prizes. So the Jews are like this trick at the top, and if you get rid of the Jews, then the natural things will emerge. And this is
I forget if I heard or read this somewhere, but I've heard an interesting reason as to why Hitler hated, or what might have contributed to his hatred of the Jews so much.
Go ahead.
And that is, when Hitler came to power, Germany was in financial ruins.
Yeah.
And there was a Great Depression. You had to walk down the street with a barrel full of money to buy a loaf of bread.
Yeah.
And so Hitler wanted, one of his promises was to revolutionize the economy and make Germany great and powerful.
Yeah.
And so at the time of Germany's economic collapse, a bunch of Jews from Israel went to Germany and opened up all these pawn shops. And so what happened was that these Jews who came to Germany and opened up all these pawn shops, because people were so desperate, they pawned all of Germany's valuable possessions,
Huh.
whether it be gold, diamonds, art, and things like that. And basically, the Jews went there, took advantage of Germany's economic collapse, and fled. And they went there just to get all of the Germans' possessions, basically.
Oh, that's an interesting
And
story.
fled. And he saw them as obviously contributing to the detriment of society, to their society, because they got so many of Germany's valuables. So I thought that was interesting.
That's a very interesting story. There's Timothy Snyder's books are very interesting because I didn't know it, but there was this in Europe. There was this big movement because what are we going to do with all these Jews? We got all these Jews around, and they wanted to move them someplace. And of course, Zionism was getting going, and so some wanted, okay, well, we should go back to where we came from. You know, the land that was promised to Abraham. Other ideas that were floated around were send all the Jews to Madagascar, and it's like, what are the Jews going to do in Madagascar? But that was to make Madagascar the Jewish homeland. So there are all kinds of crazy ideas. But basically, the 20th century was a sussing out of those ideas. And so the Nazi vision came to a catastrophic defeat, as did the Japanese imperial vision. But then the question of the Soviet Union and basically free market. Part of why the West won the Cold War was that the world is too complex for us to actually manage, which was part of the vision of the Soviet Union, which was, well, before markets are chaotic, and if we would only control and manage the market, we'd do better. And there was at that point plenty of management going on in American markets as well, but the Soviets, in some ways, the grand communist experiment demonstrated how limited human beings are in our capacity to have dominion over the world.
Oh yeah,
and that's a lesson.
Especially financial markets.
Yeah, financial markets.
I think that's one of I think that's one of the cooler stories of the earlier 20th century, is sort of looking at how things played out and then extrapolating how the limitations of humans and how we can't control everything. Because I mean, if you think about communism, it's sort of the ultimate control.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's funny, I was about to wear my Coca-Cola-esque capitalism shirt right before this. I was about to put it on, like, I'll keep it pretty neutral. But it's funny because I always think about this, how if you're one of these super left, sort of hippie-ish, Marxist people, like there are many around me, around us, it would seem you're all about individual. You should all be all about individuality, right? That's what it seems like the original hippie movement was about, right? Be you, be gay, be open, smoke your dope, right? Be you, be expressive, and sort of fuck the man mentality, where you do whatever it is you want, right? And it seems like capitalism, it's not even a system. It seems like it's the name for the lack of a system. Do you agree with that? Because capitalism is all about consensual individual exchange with other individuals, right?
Yes,
and
it's the maintenance of that. So it's really a hybrid system, because we at some point we realized that markets needed to be managed, and so then you suddenly get this really interesting dance of, on one hand, you can't control the market because then you're going to kill it. On the other hand, you can't just let it go because then you just wind up with monopolies and markets self-destruct. And so markets are sort of like domesticated animals.
Yeah.
You have to keep them alive and you have to manage them, but you can't manage too closely and you can't be too negligent. And so, yeah, no, that's true. That's true.
It's the yin and the yang.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's one way to think about it.
Order and chaos, the fine line.
Yeah. Yeah. It's trying to figure out both of them. So and the West got that right and communism didn't.
Yeah.
I mean, because growing up, I grew up during the Cold War, and and maybe it was Western propaganda, at least partly so, but there were, Soviet cars were crap. Soviet grocery stores were empty. And, and I was just listening to, I forget who it was, but someone making the point that, this younger generation that gets all enamored with certain ideas, it's like, if you're a little older, you might have remembered when these ideas were tried. No, they weren't really tried. Oh, okay. I hear that. I hear that from lots of people for lots of things.
It's so interesting to me. Like when I would drive through Marin County is notorious for having old rich people.
Yeah.
Right. And obviously it's probably, if not the top 5 wealthiest counties.
Oh yeah.
In the
It's
US.
gorgeous. Marin
beautiful.
County's beautiful.
And it's funny because I used to work in that area.
Yeah.
And I would drive, and when I'm driving through the streets, all I see are old people with electric cars with Bernie stickers.
Yeah,
and
I know. It's hilarious.
Love Trump's hate and just stuff like that. And it's funny to think the older generations sort of, or thinking of older people adopting these pseudo socialistic ideas.
I wonder if you dialed their tax rate up to 90%, what they'd say.
Yeah.
and that's part of why I try not to take too much of this stuff too seriously, because I'm old enough to have remembered people whose commitment to caring for the poor meant actual lifestyle sacrifice. And I see a lot of people who do a lot of lip service about racism and commitment to the poor, and it's like
all lip service.
It's like they're not really serious. They haven't.
It's a trend.
Yeah, it's a fad. It's a fad.
Oh, dude. I mean, I would.
Poor people are poor people are people who other people should care for them.
Completely.
And maybe I'll go there like 2 hours on Saturday, but it's really got to fit into my schedule.
Not even that.
And I don't really want to do, if the work's too smelly, I don't want to do it then. I want to do some work that feels meaningful, but fits into my schedule, and maybe I can get a nice selfie while I'm doing it.
Fair weather humanists.
Yeah, it's hilarious.
I mean,
well, we're about out of time. So if you got any last things you want to get in quick?
Any last things I want to get in quick? What do you do on your day-to-day as a pastor? As a pastor,
my job is tremendously varied. And now with COVID, it's disrupted.
How's that working out?
Well, so last week I kind of bent some of my rules and I saw some of my old people.
Okay.
And then Friday or early morning, I wake up with a fever. It's like, crap, I just killed a bunch of people this week. Fortunately, it wasn't COVID. So, it's preparing messages. It's because I'm the only pastor here at this church. I have to do a lot of things. And so actually over the last few months, it's been trying to set up, we've redone our church network. I do all kinds of things. So making messages, talking to people, running administration. It's sort of like running a small business in some ways,
Mm-hmm.
running a churches, but it's partly running a small business. It's partly reading books and thinking. It's partly presentation and showing up. It's partly being a therapist and a confidant.
Mm-hmm.
It's partly being a storyteller and a curator of stories. It's all these tiny little parts that are all, and now with YouTube, it's even more parts. So it's rather chaotic, but I find the variety enjoyable. So,
mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah, another thing. So kind of one of the reasons why I wanted you to be one of the first people I talked to was sort of because I feel like you were one of the closest people in my reach. Because I remember a few years ago when I was first getting really into Jordan Peterson and stuff like that, I really wanted to find people who had similar interests, because I didn't know anybody who, I have some friends who like Sam Harris and, watch Joe Rogan and we talk about stuff like that. But I was getting really deep into Peterson and reading a lot of the people he would talk about and just engulfing all my time in those ideas.
Yeah.
And so I think I looked up some sort of like conversation people in my area.
Yeah.
And I saw that I remember seeing like a Jordan Peterson talking group, and it was in Sacramento. And I was living in the Bay, and it was at like 8 o'clock at night, if I remember correctly, or something like that. And I was like, like that's like I really want to go, but it's just far enough of a drive, being about a little over an hour, where I don't know if it's worth it to drive out there when I'm trying to mix in school and work and all this stuff.
Sure.
And so, and then not only that, but after that, I found your YouTube channel, and then I put 2 and 2 together and realized that you were the one who started that group of people talking.
And we're still going. They just met last night.
Oh, really? Where'd you guys meet?
We meet at the church here in Sacramento.
Oh, seriously?
Yeah.
Are you going to be doing that weekly again?
We're not doing it weekly. We do about twice a month. So yeah, we'll get you on the list. And we're meeting outside. Actually, this Saturday we have another meeting. It's up at the one of the members of the church he got these 2 shacks basically on a side of a hill up in the foothills, and he's been fixing them up into cabins. And so I couldn't go the first time, but he invited so yeah, we'll get you on the list. If you should meet some of the other guys. And
that'd be cool. I mean, I'm in Davis now, so
yeah, you're very close. You're very close.
What part of Sacramento are you guys in?
If you take the causeway over the bypass, take I-5 south, get off on Florin Road. We're just 3 blocks off Highway 5 on Florin Road.
Are you guys like, is it central, west, east, Davis?
South.
West? South?
South Sacramento. Well, it's in the south end of Sacramento proper.
Okay.
Often when people say South Sacramento, they mean Sacramento County, a little bit east of us, but we're in the south end of Sacramento proper, near the Pocket.
Okay. If I remember correctly, is like Southwest or West Sacramento super industrial?
West Sacramento is super industrial. So when you drive from Davis, you'll go over the bypass, then you'll be in West Sacramento, and that's where UPS and the Postal Service and a bunch of industry is. Then you'll go over the Sacramento River, and you'll be and you can get on I-5 and take I-5 south.
Okay.
So it'll take 20, 25 minutes to drive from Davis. Yeah, I would love to come by.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, I'll make sure you get an invite.
Okay. I mean, you have my email, so.
Yep.
And then, yeah, I mean, I would definitely love to talk again. Maybe next time we could just I'll try and stay more topic oriented. I would love to talk go more in depth with my generation and Christianity. Because I mean, that's something you could have. It's like the reconciliation of science and religion. You could talk about that forever, Yeah. But yeah, I think that would be awesome to go deeper into another time.
Cool. That sounds like fun.
Yeah. And so we'll wrap it up there.
We'll land the plane. Have you watched any of the Freddie and Paul show?
No.
You've never watched the Freddie and Paul show?
No. What is it?
You should look for it on my channel. It's the Freddie and Paul show. It's how I got started on YouTube.
Freddie and Paul show. I watch a lot of your miscellaneous things, and I've known your channel for probably 2 years. So,
all right.
But did you have the Zoom call on like 2 people like right next to each other, like both of us right next side by side?
That's what I've got it right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay, I didn't do that till like halfway through.
Oh no.
I wasn't thinking about it. I was just.
Yeah.
But
I like having it side by side.
Is there any way you could upload it somewhere? Maybe I could download your version.
Oh sure. Yeah, I'll send it to you.
That'd be awesome. Problem. Really? What are you gonna do? Like drop? Well, I'll cut this last like minute out, but
never edit.
You never edit?
I almost never edit.
Are you on a Mac?
No.
Or PC?
I'm on a PC.
Oh, okay. Mac comes with iMovie, so it's so easy just to drag anything in there, drop it, cut it in half a second.
Yeah. So,
but yeah,
I never edit. I'll send it to you right after this.
Perfect.
And yeah, and I'll upload this to my channel tomorrow, so you can watch it there too. And so if you have any links, jump into the comment section and share your links where people can get to you. And
perfect.
And some of the meetup guys, they'll chime in. So, he's in Davis. He's got to come to our meetup. So,
dude, I would love to come to your meetups. I'm all about meetups. I'm an avid chess player.
Oh, so really?
Yeah. So,
So
So
we haven't played chess at our meetups, but I have an elder in the church that used to play chess when he was in high school. So
I'm a chess coach, and I have dozens of boards and stuff
really
like blocks in the trunk of my car at all times. So
oh, cool.
we want to whip out the chessboard. We could totally do that.
Well, I'll send you an email to the Saturday get together up in the foothills. And if you can't make that, that's no big deal.
Up in the foothills, so that's gonna be right past Sac.
No, we're up in the foothills is up into the foothills, and it's all outside. This is at my friend's cabin that he's building.
Oh dang,
and
that's a little bit of a drive.
Yeah, so don't worry about that. You can just come to the next meetup. It'll be later in the month.
Feel free to invite me. I still
okay.
I'm really not doing much until school starts in about 2 weeks.
Okay.
So yeah, I mean, if it's within the next 2 weeks, I could probably make it down there.
Okay.
That'd be cool.
Well, great, Tyler. Good. Well, I'll get you some of the information. If I don't, email me because I get busy and I forget stuff, so I don't mind being pestered.
Perfect. All right, man.
All right, Tyler.
Yeah, if you want to send me details about the meetup. We'll keep in contact.
Okay.
Is email the most efficient for you?
Yeah, I get behind sometimes, but it works.
It's all good, man.
Okay, Tyler.
All right, man. Good talking to you.
You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.